On a Tuesday afternoon, just after the lunch rush, the neon sign at Riverside Diner hummed like a tired lullaby. Malik Jack, 13, backpack too big for his shoulders, math workbook tucked between a sandwich and a folded note from his mom, pushed the door with his elbow and stepped into the kind of place where the floor remembers 1,000 stories. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for fries, a quiet booth, and a little space to breathe before homework. What happened next will sound loud when you hear it: the scrape of a shoe, a shoulder that wouldn't move, a word that should never be used like a weapon, and a hand that flew because some people still think power is something you prove with force. Coins scattered. A phone skittered under a table. A hush fell that shouldn't have. Malik didn't shout. He didn't swing back. He did something gentler and, in the end, much stronger. He picked up each coin, one by one, and set his phone where the microphone could listen. Because his father, Samuel Jack, a human rights lawyer who fights with statutes instead of fists, once told him, "When the world raises its voice, lower yours and take notes. The truth needs a witness." This isn't just a story about a diner or a slap. It's about a town where last names open doors and a school where hallways can feel like courtrooms for kids whose skin is red like a verdict. It's about a boy who learns that courage can be quiet, that documentation can be a shield, and that change, the kind that lasts, often begins with one steady voice saying, "I saw what happened and I wrote it down." Tonight, we'll walk with Malik from that booth under the humming neon to a principal's office where numbers finally have to speak, to a public meeting where policies meet people, to a living room where a father teaches a son that dignity is not a gift others give you. It's a decision you make about yourself. We will see fear try to grow roots, and we will watch the community grow deeper roots. If you've ever been told to let it go, if you've ever been made to feel small for asking to be treated fairly, stay with us. This is not a revenge story. This is a record of how a child turned pain into purpose, and how a family chose respect over fear so that every student who walks those hallways after him doesn't have to walk them alone. Diner with the soft confidence of a kid who just wanted fries and 5 quiet minutes before math homework, and the neon sign above the window hummed like a tired lullaby, as if to say this place had seen everything and learned nothing. The bell chimed. Grease hissed on the grill. 2 booths over, a pack of varsity jackets spilled laughter like coins. Their laughter changed pitch the instant Malik's backpack brushed past, and one shoulder refused to move. "Watch where you're going," the tallest boy said, a smile that wasn't a smile pinned to his face, the kind that asks a question it already decided to answer. Then came the word ugly and old, thrown like a stone dressed up as a joke, one of those words people defend as just teasing, when they only ever aim it at kids who look like Malik. The room tightened. The tallest boy, Brett, let his class ring glint like a badge and flicked Malik's cap so hard it fell. A paper-wrapped sandwich tumbled from the backpack, and a fist came faster than a thought. The slap cracked through the diner sharp, theatrical, the way certain men clap after a touchdown, and every head turned except for the one behind the counter that pretended to be busy stacking cups. Coins rolled over the tiles, one circling on its edge longer than physics said it should. Malik's cheek burned. His eyes filled, not with tears, but with that hot, bewildered air you breathe when the world decides to put you on trial without a judge. "Say you're sorry," Brett said, not meaning it. There it was, the test that too many boys learn to give and too many rooms learn to pass. Make the black kid apologize for touching the air in front of you. Malik didn't raise his voice. He lowered it like his father, Samuel Jack, had taught him. When the room tries to swallow you, give the truth something small and sturdy to hold. He crouched to gather each coin, slid his phone beneath the table leg where the microphone could hear, and said, "I'm here to order food." The manager, Ray Kendall, heard that sentence like it was a threat. He wiped an already clean spot on the counter, kept his eyes on the towel, and announced to the room, "We maintain standards here," glancing past Malik the way some people look past a painting they don't want to admit is real. Brett laughed. "You heard him," he said to the room, not to Malik. "Standards." Someone near the window snorted. A woman in a cardigan bit her lip, then looked down at her menu as if the ink might save her. "Sir," Malik tried again, palms open, voice steady. "I'd like a cheeseburger and fries." Ray's mouth pinched. "We reserve the right to refuse service." He recited the little sign by the register suddenly felt like a gavel. "Especially to kids who come in here causing trouble. Trouble, in rooms like this, is another word for presence. Trouble is existing at the wrong table in the wrong skin, while the wrong boys need a story to tell later. Brett stepped closer. "Say you're sorry for bumping me," he said, ring-tapping against the edge of the table, a metronome for humiliation, "and say you didn't mean to." He didn't finish, but the room knew how the sentence wanted to end. Malik remembered the tone his father used when he read case law at the kitchen table. Precise, unhurried, factual. "You blocked the aisle," he said. "You used a slur. You slapped me." A phone camera peered over a booth's back. Another lens rose like a periscope from behind a milkshake glass. "This is how it happens now. People record, then only watch the clips that comfort their side." "Kid," Ray snapped, "don't escalate. It is a kind of theater when an adult tells the smaller body that the bigger hand on the smaller face doesn't count as escalation. I'm calling security." Malik felt the heat rise in his cheek and the cool weight of the moment settle in his chest, and in that strange middle temperature, he remembered his father's other line, "The truth needs a witness." He gave the room a witness. "What's your name?" he asked, meeting Brett's eyes, steady enough to make the older boy's laugh wobble. "The one your coach uses when he introduces you at halftime." For a second, the diner faltered. The line cook paused mid-scrape. A straw hung frozen halfway to a mouth, and even the neon seemed to dim. Brett's jaw twitched. "You don't get to say my name," he said, and there it was again, the hierarchy hidden in something as simple as a syllable. Names can be doors or fences. In towns like this, some names open rooms, and some names are checked at the threshold. Brett's friends shifted, stage left and stage right, the way extras do when they sense the script is about to ask more of them. "Ray," Malik said, still soft, "please take my order." Ray lifted the phone. "We've had issues with kids like—" He swallowed the rest. The sentence didn't need to finish for everyone to taste it. The word that would have followed hovered in the steam above the grill, unspoken but fully delivered. That was the moment the air really changed. Not the slap, not the slur, but the adult who could have chosen to be a wall and chose to be a door swinging the wrong way. A man at the corner stool coughed the way people do when they want to be brave without being noticed and said, "Hey now," then folded his hands and let the room move past him. Ray started dialing. Brett leaned in close enough that Malik could see the tiny nick in the gold ring and smell the syrup on his breath. "Say it," Brett whispered. "Say you're sorry for bumping into me." Malik's cheek throbbed. His phone blinked red under the table. He reached for his cap, brushed the dust from its brim, and said, very clearly, so the room and the recording could both hear, "I'm not sorry for standing where I'm allowed to stand." Silence can be a verdict. This one felt like an appeal waiting to be filed. Somewhere behind the counter, a fryer beeped. Somewhere outside, a siren negotiated another street. Somewhere in Malik's chest, a small door opened, the one that lets a boy walk from shock to clarity without breaking. He took a slow step back, a slow breath in, and a slow decision forward. "I'm leaving now," he told Ray, not because he was wrong, but because he was ready to be right where it would count, where notes turn into narrative and narrative into action. He lifted his backpack, nodded once at the room that decided not to see him, and pushed into the hiss of the neon. By the time the bell had stopped ringing, Brett was already rewriting the scene for his friends, and a clipped video would soon hit a private chat, short enough to convenience a lie. But Malik had the long version, the true version, the one where a boy asks for a burger and gets a history lesson instead. And when the morning comes, that lesson will follow him down a hallway that sometimes feels like a courtroom, where lockers can hold messages no child should find, and rules can change depending on who's asking to be protected, because this is where our story moves next. Morning came with the sound of lockers waking up, metal yawns, sneaker whispers, the soft panic of a bell that always seems a little ahead of you. Malik walked into Lincoln High with his backpack balanced just so, the way you carry something that holds more than books. He traced the familiar route past the trophy case with the Golden Boys frozen mid-victory and stopped at his locker. The door wouldn't open at first. It stuck the way old doors do when they've learned to resist certain hands. He breathed, tried again, and the hinge gave with a tired sigh. Inside, where his lunch usually sat and a photo of his mom smiled from a magnet clip, someone had sprayed 2 words in shaky black, "Go back." A loop of coarse string tied in the language history never should have taught, hung from the top hook like a punchline delivered in silence. For a long second, Malik didn't move. Fluorescence buzzed. A boy 2 lockers down snuck a glance and then stared very hard at his shoes. A girl with a glittery binder looked over, swallowed, and tugged her friend's sleeve because courage is contagious, but so is fear. Malik heard himself breathe. He slid his phone from his pocket and, without hurry, took a picture. Then another with the clock in frame. Then a third with his student ID beside the loop, so there'd be no question whose space this was. When he turned, Officer Denton, the school resource officer with the high and tight haircut and the habit of calling kids young man, only when they looked like Malik, was already there. "Got a tip about vaping," Denton said, eyes flicking to the backpack like he was checking a box on a form. "Gonna need to look through your bag." "A tip?" Malik asked, steady. "From who?" "Anonymous," Denton answered, which in some buildings is another word for unaccountable. The officer didn't ask the 2 boys horsing around at the fountain. He didn't ask the girl handing off a Starbucks cup at the corner. He asked the kid with the locker that said, "Go back." Malik unzipped the bag. Book, notebook, pencil case, chess club flyer. Denton poked, prodded, found nothing, and grunted the way people do when you've denied them the easy version of you they planned to find. "Be careful who you hang with," he said, like advice, like a warning, and moved on. First period tried to be normal. Mr. Crane diagrammed sentences while phones hummed with last night's clipped video. A boy in a diner walking away after causing trouble. Social media does that. It trims truth until it fits a timeline. In the margin of his paper, Malik wrote the date, the time he'd found his locker, and the officer's name. Second period was P.E., where the gym smelled like rubber, and yesterday, and Brett's teammate set a screen with his elbow high, accidentally catching Malik under the ribs. Air fled his lungs in a hard, bright rush. The whistle blew not for the elbow, but for Malik's unsportsmanlike reaction to having his breath stolen. Coach Palmer clipboard, ball cap, the neutral tone of a man who owns 100 ways to say, "Don't make this hard," met Malik's eyes for a fraction and looked past them. "Play on," he said to everyone else. Between classes, a whisper trailed him the way smoke does after the match has left the room. "He's making a big deal. It was just a joke. You know who his dad is?" Names do the heavy lifting in towns like this. Some get you waved through, some get you weighed down. At lunch, Malik took the back table by the window because sunlight is its own kind of friend. He set his tray down like a declaration. Lintran AP Bio hands' quiet spine slid into the seat across from him without asking because that's what friends do. "The nest is buzzing," she said, barely moving her lips. "Eagle's nest. Seniors chat. They're passing around a clip cut so it looks like you shoved Brett." "Can you get it?" Malik asked. She didn't promise. She just nodded in that way that says, "I'll try," which is sometimes the bravest sentence in a school day. By the last bell, the counselor had suggested focusing on your work and not letting little things derail your goals, the word little doing more damage than anyone in that office understood. Homeroom had hosted a small lecture on cultural misunderstandings without ever saying who misunderstood whom. In the hallway, Mr. Alvarez, the custodian with the gentle laugh and the strongest back in the building, pressed a folded paper towel into Malik's palm as they passed. The way men used to tuck notes into each other's hands in churches when saying certain truths out loud was asking for a storm. "Head up, Mijo," he murmured, and kept walking. Kindness can make you cry faster than cruelty. Malik swallowed hard and kept the paper towel like a passport. Then came the office. Vice Principal Hargrove, precise hair, precise vocabulary, the careful math of a woman who has learned to balance complaints like ledgers read from a form about conflict between students and both sides' responsibility. It is a kind of magic trick, the way institutions can fold a slap, a slur, and a loop of string into the same category as a boy's refusal to apologize for existing. "We're assigning you 1 day of detention for disruption," she said, "and we expect you to avoid contact with Brett to de-escalate." There was a poster behind her that said, "Every student, every day." In the quiet of the hallway afterward, Malik leaned against a cool cinder block and felt the shape of the day in his chest, how each small moment had been nudged to look like it wasn't what it was. He could hear his father's voice in the space behind his ribs. "When the world raises its voice, lower yours and take notes." He pulled out his phone. Photo of the locker. Photo of the string. Photo of the gym clock at the moment the whistle blew. A line in his notes app, "Officer Denton, search. Nothing found. Another line. Counselor, little things. He wrote it all like he was laying down stones in a river so he could cross back later without drowning in a she said. Over by the stairwell, someone laughed too loudly at something that wasn't funny. A door banged. Somewhere, a printer chattered flyers about kindness. Malik zipped his backpack, took one last look at the poster that promised him something the building couldn't quite deliver, and started toward the library. If this is what the hallways would be, then he would bring light with him. The truth needs a witness, and witnesses need a system. He opened the door to the quiet room with the long tables and the humming computers, found an empty seat, and began to build the thing that would turn a day like this into proof. This is where the story shifts from surviving the hour to designing the record, because some days take your breath, and some days teach you how to write it back. Document to protect. The library smelled like paper and electricity, the way places do when stories are about to become evidence, and Malik chose the furthest table from the door so the sun could fall across the wood like a highlighter. He laid out his father's DTP kit, document to protect the small composition notebook with a grid of faint dots, the blue pen that never bleeds through, the portable charger, the clean USB drive with a strip of masking tape for labels, and the habit that mattered most. Name everything like you want a judge to understand it. He opened a new folder on the desktop, DTP1, Riverside, and began the ritual he'd been taught at the kitchen table between spaghetti and case law. Date the entry, YYYMMDD. Time in 24-hour format. Location. Participants. What happened. What was said. What could be disproved. What could be proved. Photo. Locker interior with Go Back. Time. Stamped. Photo. The loop of string with his student ID for scale. Note. Officer Denton search no contraband remark. Be careful who you hang with. Clip. Gym clock at 10 hours 22 minutes and 18 seconds. Whistle. Arm to ribs. Coach says play on. He dragged each file into the folder. Right-click to generate a fingerprint. Hash values look like nonsense, until your future depends on their certainty, and pasted the alphanumeric string into the notebook so no one could say later the files had changed. You're really doing this, Lynn whispered as she slid into the chair beside him, eyes bright with the kind of fear that doesn't back down. You still want the nest? He nodded. She opened her laptop like a magician palming a coin and showed him a screen where an eagle logo flexed over a dark background. Eagle's Nest, the seniors' group chat with the kind of swagger that thinks it's invisible. A friend of a friend had added her for a study drive, because the internet is always the place where trouble puts on a tuxedo and pretends to be useful. The thread was already moving, a clipped video of Malik at the diner, cropped to show him walking away as text floated, "Kids started at lol," and a string of replies that read like a classroom where no one had ever been taught history matters. Here, Lynn said, pointing. A meme Malik's face photoshopped onto a cartoon of a crying child. Caption, should have said sorry. A screenshot of his locker message. Nice decor. A poll. Bump him again or ignore? And then, uglier. A screenshot of the loop tied just so, the kind of knot that carries ghosts inside it, with a caption that wasn't brave enough to use the word it wanted but brave enough to aim it. Malik felt that strange double sensation again, the heat in his cheek and the cool in his chest, and he did what he could do. He screen-recorded the entire scroll with the system clock visible in the corner, a wide capture to include usernames, emoji reactions, the pixels that tell the truth when people decide not to. Lynn reached over and switched on her phone's camera to record his screen recording because redundancy is the armor of the honest. We need names, she said, and they read them like a roll call. First names, last initials, jersey numbers folded into handles. One stuck like a burr rug. 71 with a profile icon that looked suspiciously like a district badge photo reduced to a blur. A joke, maybe, or a shadow. The account had tapped a laughing emoji on the poll and dropped a single-word reply. Finally. Malik didn't say the name out loud. He did what his father would do. He wrote the handle, the timestamp, the message ID, and a note to himself verify through an independent route later. Miss Ortiz, the librarian, drifted by with her cart of reshelved paperbacks and the kind of glance teachers use when they see something they aren't supposed to see but know must be seen. She set a book on their table without breaking stride. On the cover, a novel about a boy who writes his way out of a map someone else drew. Checkout slip is inside, she murmured, the way a kindness pretends to be bureaucracy to protect itself. In the slip pocket, Malik found a sticky note with a Wi-Fi guest login that didn't route through the usual filters. Not a rule broken, just a door opened. He sent the diner audio he'd captured and the locker photos to a fresh email he and his dad had set up months ago, deposit only at no subject lines, no body text, just attachments. Because sometimes the smartest thing you can say is nothing. He uploaded doubles to an encrypted drive with a folder called If Needed that only 2 people could open. He exported a PDF of his notes and named it DTP1 log V10 PDF. He plugged in the USB and added a readme.txt, a simple listing of files and hashes, the map to the map. Heads up, Lynn whispered, eyes flicking toward the door. Brett and 2 teammates sauntered in with overdue slips and the kind of swagger that means never having to whisper. Miss Ortiz floated intercept, hip against the counter, mouth making librarian small talk that stretched like a net. How was the game? Did coach post the stats? Brett, your mom left a message about the college fair. The boys stopped, suddenly remembering that adults sometimes have memories longer than hallways. Malik kept his eyes on the screen, cursor steady. Another message hit Eagle's Nest. Administration's handling it. Keep it low. A reply. Dent says they're watching him. Another. A photo of Malik in the hall, taken that morning from behind, captioned, All rise. The joke wore a robe. Malik saved, and saved again. And because you can tell a system by what it laughs at, he clicked into a subthread titled Traditions, where seniors bragged about stunts that sounded like pranks until you counted who they always chose and what those kids always had in common. A name appeared there, Kevin M., 11 years old last fall, lunch money gone, wrist bruised, a photo of his eyes looking at the camera like a question no one had answered yet. Malik's pen paused. This ledger wasn't just his. He opened a new section in the log. Other victims, probable pattern, and started a list. For each entry, he wrote what he knew, what he could prove, what he needed to find. In the quiet between keystrokes, he heard the softest sound, the building's HVAC kicking on, like the school taking a breath it hadn't realized it was holding. He printed a copy of the log and slid it into a manila folder with the kind of care you give to baby birds and court filings. On the tab, in his neat block letters, he wrote, DTP1, Riverside, Jack, M. Then he did one more thing. He wrote an index card to himself and tucked it in the front. If today gets noisy, lower your voice and take notes. At 4:10, the PA announced an IT maintenance window that would clear cached data on student devices overnight. The kind of sentence that sounds like housekeeping until you remember who's been sweeping what under which rugs. Malik and Lynn exchanged a look, and together they moved faster, finishing the uploads, dropping the USB into a pencil pouch, taping the pouch under the table where dust bunnies keep secrets for an hour if you ask nicely. As they packed, Lynn squeezed his shoulder. You're not alone, she said, and it landed like a promise, like a plan. Malik closed the folder, the notebook, the laptop, and stood, the manila file warm in his hand. If the day were a river, he had stones now. If the hallway were a courtroom, he had exhibits. And if the next room was an office with a door that closed too easily, he had a father who knew how to open it with statutes instead of volume. He pushed into the cooling afternoon with the sun in his eyes and the record in his bag, already hearing tomorrow in his head, where a calm voice would say to an administrator who counted detentions but not disparities, Let's talk about Title VI. The house was quiet in that charged way homes get after hard days, the kind of quiet that carries the clink of a spoon like a bell. Malik's cheek wore the map of yesterday. His notes wore the spine of tomorrow. Samuel Jack set a bowl of soup by his son's elbow, then unfolded a yellow legal pad like a flag he'd carried a long time. You did right, he said. Not loud, not triumphant, just certain. Now we make it count. He wrote 3 lines at the top in block letters. Malik knew by heart facts. Law, remedy, and underlined each the way a builder checks a foundation. We don't match their volume, Samuel said. We raise our standards. By 10 the next morning, the front office at Lincoln High smelled like copy toner and coffee that had given up. The poster behind the receptionist promised belonging in cheerful letters. The plastic frame had a crack along the bottom edge. Principal Keating ushered them into a conference room where the chairs tried to be comfortable and the table tried to look expensive. Vice Principal Hargrove was already there with a folder the color of caution. Officer Denton leaned on the door jamb, a thumb hooked in his duty belt like habit. A District Attorney Ballard, outside counsel, clicked her pen once and aimed the smile lawyers use when they want you to underestimate them. Samuel set a slim stack of paper on the table, pages clipped square. "Before we begin," he said, "a preservation notice. Hallway cameras 100 through 300 wing, especially between 10:20 and 10:30 yesterday. Gym cameras during the second period. Radio logs for SRO response. Any emails or messages referencing my son or incidents this week, please suspend routine deletion." Ballard started to speak. He lifted a palm. "And an assurance of immediate safety measures. No. Contact order with named students, schedule separation, adult escort between classes if needed, and a written plan by day's end. Interim remedies are not admissions, they're obligations." Keating cleared his throat. "Mr. Jack, we want to handle this internally. There's been a misunderstanding among students. We don't want to politicize." "I'm not politicizing," Samuel said, even and exact. "I'm legalizing. Lincoln High receives federal funds. Under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, your district has a duty to prevent and remedy racial harassment that creates a hostile environment. When a child finds 'go back' in his locker beside a loop tied to America's worst memory, when a slur and a slap are followed by adult inaction, misunderstanding is the wrong word." He slid a single-page summary forward. "These are preliminary facts, documented. Here are the laws that apply. And here," he tapped the last page, "are the remedies we expect while the investigation proceeds." Hargrove frowned at the word loop as if language could be scolded into behaving. "We don't know who put that there." "That's why you preserve and investigate," Samuel replied. "And you disavow it out loud so every child in this building hears where the adults stand." He looked at Denton without heat. "Yesterday you searched my son's bag on an anonymous tip, minutes after he reported racial harassment. That is disparate treatment masquerading as routine. If you have objective criteria for SRO searches, let's see them. If you don't, adopt them today." Ballard finally found her opening. "Mr. Jack, surely you see we have to balance fairness to all students. Your request for raw data," "Not raw," Samuel said. "Routine. 3 years of discipline data disaggregated by race, referrals, suspensions, expulsions, and SRO contacts. We'll file a public records request, and we'll share it with the Office for Civil Rights. I'm also filing with OCR this afternoon, so there's a neutral referee. You're welcome to cooperate. You're not welcome to delay." Keating shifted in his chair, somewhere between offended and afraid. "We value every student, every day," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the poster down the hall. "Good," Samuel said, and his voice softened in the way that makes truth hit harder. "Start by valuing the one whose cheek still hurts when he smiles." He opened a second folder. "You have faculty who know. You have staff who have seen. Create a confidential reporting channel outside the chain of command that failed yesterday. Offer amnesty to students who come forward as witnesses. And announce today that racial slurs and symbols will be treated as major offenses under district code with mandatory staff training who minimize them." Hargrove bristled. "You're asking us to admit fault in public." "I'm asking you to lead in public," Samuel said. "The difference is the difference between fear and respect." Ballard tried a different tack, softer. "Mr. Jack, your son recorded other students. There are privacy concerns. There's a risk of this turning into a spectacle." Samuel met her gaze. "There's already a spectacle. It started when an adult told a black child not to escalate after being struck and slurred. As for privacy, he recorded his own interactions in public hallways. He's turned everything over to us. We'll use channels the law provides." He closed his pad. "We're not here to embarrass your school. We're here to fix it." A beat stretched, paper settled. Somewhere a bell rang, and a tide of feet washed past the door. Keating looked at Hargrove, then at Ballard, and something in his face unclenched, maybe exhaustion, maybe the first inch of courage. "We can issue the hold," he said. "We can draft an interim plan by 3. He glanced toward Denton. "Body cam?" Denton shifted. "I didn't activate. It was routine." "Then change what routine is," Samuel said, not unkind. "That's the work." On their way out, Miss Ortiz found Malik in the hallway, and passed him a hall pass that was really a benediction. Mr. Alvarez tipped his cap the way men pass hope without making a speech. Samuel squeezed his son's shoulder. "We push the right doors," he said. "If they don't open, we bring the right keys." By late afternoon, an email hit Samuel's phone with a draft safety plan that looked like a hedge. He forwarded it to OCR with his complaint and copied the superintendent. 10 minutes later, a different email began to thread through student phones. A clipped video, a caption that said, "It's all being handled," a rumor that Malik had brought lawyers to scare the school. The machine that thrives on doubt had woken up. Samuel looked at Malik and, with the gentlest smile, said what he always said when the noise got clever. "Lower your voice. Take notes. We'll answer the rumor with records." And as the sun slid toward the football field and the district's PR account warmed up, the next front opened not in the conference room, but out where stories get cut to fit screens and truth has to learn how to survive the edit, the smear machine, and a knock at midnight. By dusk, the story had learned a new trick: cut itself short and grow teeth. A local booster page posted the diner clip trimmed to 20 seconds, slapped on a caption, "Teen causes scene. Staff keeps order, and let the comments do what comments do when people want permission to say what they already believe." 3 brand new accounts flag avatars, locker room humor for usernames began to seed the same lines across feeds. Malik started it. Malik has a record. Malik plays the victim. None of it is true. All of it sticky. The district's PR account chimed in with a sentence engineered to sound caring and say nothing. "Lincoln High is aware of a student matter and is addressing it internally." That was the gasoline. Influencer dad blogger with a drone hobby shared the clip to 40,000 locals. A radio host added a smirk about kids these days, and suddenly the comments weren't about a diner or a locker. They were about a last name, a skin tone, and a father who brought lawyers to school. In Malik's DMs, someone sent a coffin emoji. Another sent an address that was almost but not quite his. He muted the phone, then unmuted it, because quiet felt like surrender, and noise felt like drowning. Samuel didn't raise his voice. He raised his paperwork. He filed formal notices with timestamps, sent platform takedowns citing harassment and manipulated media, attached the full-length audio and stills of the locker and loop so moderators would have context. He sent a second preservation letter, the kind with words like spoliation and litigation hold to the diner owner and the district's IT director, copying the superintendent and the insurer because some doors only open when you knock where the money lives. He logged every request with neat tags PLAT1 TKDN001 DISTHOLDA DINERHOLDA and forwarded copies to the Office for Civil Rights, not as show, but as scaffold. "We answer rumors with records," he told Malik for the 3rd time that evening, pouring tea like a prayer. At 11:42 p.m., the doorbell stabbed the quiet. A heavy knock followed 3 hard hits that bent the air in the hallway. Malik's stomach dropped. His hands went cold and careful. Outside, blue strobes bounced off the windows. "Police!" a voice called, brisk and bright in the way people sound when they've already decided what the story is. "We received a call about a disturbance at this address. Swatting comes in many sizes. Sometimes it's a full lie and a tactical stack. Sometimes it's a welfare check sharpened into a blade." Samuel did the things he had taught 100 families to do. Lights on, hands visible, phone on a shelf recording the foyer, chain still on the door. "Good evening, officers," he said through the narrow gap, steady as a level. "There is no disturbance here. My wife is asleep. My son is beside me. Our home is quiet. May I have the CAD number for the call and the callback number of the reporting party?" The younger officer's jaw worked. The older one looked over Samuel's shoulder and saw what mattered. Calm faces, a living room that looked like Tuesday, a tripod by the bookshelf that said, "We know how this goes." "Sir, you need to verify," Samuel answered, not unkind. "And you need to note this address for caution. We are the target of a public harassment campaign related to a racial incident at a school. If you enter, it will escalate the tactic. If you verify and document, it will slow it down." He kept his palms open where everyone could see them. Malik kept his own open too, throat tight with the strange shame of having to prove you've done nothing. The radio crackled, a neighbor's porch light blinked on, and whatever had been coiled in the older officer's shoulders unwound a little. He nodded to his partner, took the address again, and by the time the cruiser rolled away, Malik could feel his heartbeat settle back into the slow lane. Even then, the house stayed lit until midnight as they wrote everything down. Time, badge numbers, the exact phrasing of the call, the way the older officer's voice softened when he saw the tripod. In the morning, Samuel walked the notes to the police chief's office with a letter that asked for three things: a verification protocol for anonymous calls involving their address, a formal caution flag in the dispatch system for likely swatting, and a liaison contact for any further welfare checks. He asked, too, for a courtesy call to the chief of the school's SRO unit, not to scold but to align if the point of the bad faith noise was to make the family look volatile. Then the counterpoint would be boring, meticulous, undeniable. The smear accounts kept posting, "Sources say," because that's what they do when proven wrong. They move the goalposts and call it a touchdown. But the platforms began to issue those bloodless emails that still feel like relief. "We have removed content for violating harassment and hate speech policies," and little gray boxes began to replace little cruel ones. Dolores from the diner left a voicemail at the school, offering to speak on record about the manager's "don't get involved with those kids" policy. A parent at church texted a screenshot from a private booster chat. "Keep it low, admin's on it," Lynn pinged. Eagle's Nest was quieter, but a shadow account was corralling seniors to handle optics. Malik took another breath, then another, and opened his log. He added the midnight visit, the takedown receipts, and the new rumor paths. He wasn't trying to win the internet. He was building a bridge over it. That afternoon, the district posted a flyer emergency board meeting, Thursday 6 p.m., and tried to make it about community climate without saying the words that had made Thursday necessary. In group chats across town, lines were drawn. Some people practiced their brave voices in the mirror. Others sharpened their whispers. Malik packed his folder, slid fresh batteries into the recorder, and set a spare pen on the table because the last thing you want at a microphone is a pen that won't write. "Hallway at 5, Samuel said, touching his shoulder. "We sit front row. We ask for time. We bring the long version." And as the sun swung toward the parking lot where speeches echo best, the story turned its face from screens to a room with a gavel and a clock, where policy and people would finally have to look each other in the eye. The hearing where politeness met the record. The auditorium smelled like old varnish and fresh opinions. Every seat a heartbeat, every aisle a rumor, and on the stage a long table with nameplates that tried to sound like authority: Calder, board chair; Keating, principal; Hargrove, vice principal; Denton, SRO; Ballard, district council, and a microphone with a little red light that would decide who got 3 minutes and who got 3 more. Posters on the back wall said "Community," "Climate" in blues and greens, gentle fonts trying to soften sharp facts. By 5:50, the sign-up sheet for public comment had run out of lines. By 5:55, a woman from the Booster Club was handing out "Keep It Civil" stickers like shields. Malik sat front row center with Samuel on his left, Lynn on his right, a manila folder on his lap that held the kind of quiet that changes rooms. When the gavel fell, Miss Calder read a statement about concerns raised, the importance of respect, and ongoing internal review, every phrase carefully sanded until it couldn't cut anything. Then she set the timer, and the town stood up one voice at a time to tell itself what it was. A grandfather spoke first, slow and careful, about a grandson who had learned to pack his lunch in his backpack because older boys had learned to take what wasn't theirs. A man in a Letterman jacket from the 1990s called this politics and wondered why good kids were being targeted. A mother in scrubs trembled as she said the word loop like it was a ghost in her mouth. A senior girl read 2 sentences and cried through the third, and the timer beeped, and the gavel tapped, and the chair asked for calm that sounded a lot like quiet. When Samuel's name was called, the room adjusted itself without meaning to the way air does when the weather changes. He thanked the chair and the board and the principal, and then thanked, by name, the students and staff who had come in fear anyway, because bravery hears itself best when someone else says it out loud. "We are not here because a child made a scene," he said, voice warm and exact. "We are here because a child was made into one." He dropped the facts into the microphone like stones into a river so the board could hear where the current broke, the slur in the diner, the slap that followed, the go-back scrawl inside a child's locker, the loop of string that history does not allow to be a prank, the SRO search on an anonymous tip minutes after the report of harassment, the clipped video pushed to make the smallest lie look almost like the largest truth. "I'm not asking you to choose a side," he said. "I'm asking you to choose a standard." Then he did the thing that turns rooms. He opened Malik's folder and slid 3 pages to the clerk for the record and index of exhibits with hashes, a chain of custody note in Malik's neat block letters, and a 1-page summary of remedies already required by law. Ballard leaned forward. "Mr. Jack, this is not a trial?" he said gently. "No, it's a mirror." He pivoted, not to the board, but to the students packed along the walls. "If you have been told to let it go, when what happened to you would never be let go if it happened to somebody else tonight, we say the words out loud. This is racial harassment. This is a hostile environment. This is a duty to fix." The timer blinked red. The chair said, 1 minute. Samuel nodded and used it to ask for 4 things the way carpenters ask for precise cuts. An external investigator with no ties to the district. An immediate no-contact order and route changes for Malik. A public commitment that racial slurs and symbols are major incidents under code. And the release, within 10 business days, of 3 years of disaggregated discipline and SRO contact data. The gavel tapped. The room exhaled. Then the clerk called a name that made the diner crowd sit up straighter, Dolores Santos, and a woman in a cardigan stepped to the mic with hands that were steady even though her voice wasn't. "I work at Fat Tony's," she said. "I saw that boy get hit. The manager told me, don't get involved with those kids. Their kind only brings trouble." You could feel the words land where the posters couldn't reach. Ballard tried to object to hearsay in a public comment session. Calder frowned and let the woman finish because sometimes a board remembers it's a human before it remembers it's a policy. "I didn't speak up then," Dolores said, looking at Malik and then at the floor. "But I'm speaking now." A few claps broke loose and turned into many. The gavel tried to catch them and failed. Hargrove asked for the mic, chin lifted just enough to telegraph composure. "We take all reports seriously," she said. "As for these online allegations about staff and student group chats, ridiculous. I don't know what an eagle's nest even is." It would have been a small sentence on a long night if not for the next 5 seconds. Malik stood not breaking decorum, not raising his voice, and asked the chair for permission to display one image. Calder glanced at Ballard. Ballard opened her mouth. The room, somehow, asked for it too. Lynn carried the laptop to the projector like it were an offering. On the screen, a scroll from Eagle's Nest with a poll and a cluster of laughing emojis. Under one of them, RIGV 71. Malik did not say gotcha, because victory without standards becomes the thing you're trying to fix. He said, "We have an account handle, we have timestamps, and we have cross-reference metadata showing this post was sent from a device logged into the district Wi-Fi under a staff credential at 10:41 a.m. yesterday." A sound moved through the room that wasn't applause and wasn't a gasp. It was the sound people make when something they suspected becomes something they can't ignore. Hargrove's smile went waxy. "Anyone can fake a handle," she said. "Anyone can. We can authenticate through the district's own logs when they comply with the preservation letter," Samuel said, still seated, still steady. "And if the district refuses, we'll authenticate through the Office for Civil Rights. This is why we asked you to say the words out loud tonight." The chair huddled with counsel. Keating stared at his hands as if they might tell him who he meant to be. When Calder returned to the mic, her voice had a new weight in it. "Effective immediately," she read, "the board is placing Vice Principal Hargrove on administrative leave, pending external review. We are voting now on the appointment of an independent investigator. We will issue a public statement condemning racial slurs and symbols as major offenses, and we will release discipline data, disaggregated by race, within 10 business days." The vote was a flurry of ayes with one no that sounded very small in a very large room. The audience didn't cheer so much as sag, like a town that had been holding a plank and could finally drop to its knees. On the way out, the old varsity jacket man looked at his shoes. The grandfather patted Malik's shoulder. "Miss." Ortiz pressed a folded sheet into Samuel's hand with a list of students willing to testify. Outside, night had come honestly and cool. Cameras waited. Microphones wanted a quote. Samuel gave them the only one that wouldn't turn into chum by morning. "We're grateful for the first step," The work is next. Malik held the manila folder a little closer, felt the space where fear used to sit, and thought of the subthreads they hadn't opened yet, the messages that would vanish by morning if no one moved, the way truth sometimes needs a locksmith and sometimes needs a choir. He glanced at Lynn, who already had her laptop open under the parking lot lights, and at the cluster of kids who had stopped whispering and started asking, "How can we help?" The gavel's echo was still in his ears as they headed for the car, and the night felt like a door they were about to learn how to open. Because the hearing had cracked something, but the proof, the deep, patient proof, would be built in the dark with backups and timestamps and courage that knows how to count, and that is where we go next. The library after hours felt like a chapel screens, asleep like stained glass at dusk, the copier humming a low hymn, Miss Ortiz turning the key with a care that said, "We're doing this right." She logged the time on a yellow slip, 6:12 p.m., and placed it beside a basket of loaner Chromebooks and a box of sticky notes labeled Chain of Custody, because even small truths deserve paperwork. Mr. Alvarez rolled in an extension cord and 3 packs of peanut butter crackers with the solemnity of a man delivering tools, not snacks. "If the building breathes," he said, tapping the duct above, "I'll hear it." He would sit by the door, a sentinel with a walkie and a broom. Lynn spread their plan across a table like blueprints. Column A, what we know. Column B, where it lives. Column C, who can get it. Column D, how to preserve it without breaking rules. The maintenance notice about clearing cached data overnight ticked like a clock in the corner of Malik's mind. This wasn't a heist. This was a rescue. They had one evening to pull conversations back from the edge of forget. Their first break was mundane and perfect. A sophomore named Maya produced an older iPhone from her backpack, the kind grandparents upgrade out of and never wipe. "My cousin gave me his last year," she said, cheeks pink. "He was in Eagle's Nest before he graduated." Lynn's eyes lit. If he had iCloud messages on, the account might still sync archives. Under Miss Ortiz's supervision, they signed into the cousin's Apple ID with a code he texted from his new phone. A slow rain of bubbles began to fill the screen, months of chat history repopulating, like a town rebuilding itself in reverse. Lynn screen-recorded the scroll with the system clock in frame and airdropped the file to a library Mac. Malik pressed the record button on a second phone pointed at the first, redundant like seat belts and airbags. They built a habit. Name every capture like a witness statement. EAGLESNEST 202409112, thread, jokes, A, is greater than R, MP4. Paul, bump again or ignore, 202503102103112, PNG. Handle, Herg, 71, React, Laugh, 2025-10. For each, Malik generated a hash code and wrote it in his notebook with Lynn's neat initials as the first verifier. Miss Ortiz signed the sticky chain of custody tags and dated them. No one raised their voice. The seriousness made the room warm. By 7, seniors who had sat on their hands for a year started arriving in ones and twos, faces open in that brave way that looks like fear from far away. "I have screenshots," said one, slipping a flash drive from a jacket pocket. "My brother said to give you this." A defensive end with a split lip said nothing, only handed over a Gmail address and typed a password with shaking fingers. Lynn brought a spare USB-C cable out of a box like a magician and mirrored his Android chat app to the Mac to export a full-thread PDF with message IDs in the margins. No one posted anything. No one leaked. This wasn't about the internet. This was about a ledger that could survive a courtroom. The ugly part came, not with the memes, but with the manual. Malik found it inside a Google Drive shared under the innocent name Traditions, 2025. Permission to anyone in the district with the link. The document read like a playbook that had been passed down and copy-pasted. P screens aim high rib, whistle covers sound. Hydrate trick cup accidentally dumps on bag by fountain. Standards line repeat until target argues. Mark insubordination. Coach neutral. Denton routine. Hargrove will smooth. At the top, a cheery header. Eagles take care of the nest. At the bottom, a sign-off. EN committee. Lynn didn't swear, but the breath she let out had sharp edges. Malik printed it to PDF, wrote the URL, date, and owner district in the log, and generated a hash that looked like the kind of random that, to the right eyes, means anchor. At 7:42, the library phone rang. Miss Ortiz picked up, said, twice, and hung up. Technology says the maintenance window starts at 10, she said, meaning, hustle without hurrying. Mr. Alvarez brought in 2 more power strips and quietly turned the thermostat down a notch. Cooler brains make fewer mistakes. An email landed in Malik's inbox at 8:03, subject line blank, sender Bennett, temp at. The body was 1 sentence and 3 attachments. The sentence, protect my name until the investigator asks. Attachment 1. A forwarded thread from April Board Chair Calder to Keating and Hargrove. We need more visible enforcement to deter certain behaviors in certain neighborhoods. Attachment 2. A reply from Hargrove. SRO presence and referrals will help us keep standards. Attachment 3. A draft talking points doc. Avoid terms racial and harassment in external statements. Emphasize community climate. Malik looked up at the nameplate in his memory, Calder, and felt the night tilt. He didn't want a villain. He wanted a fix. He printed the PDFs, wrote hashes, slid them into the manila file, and wrote 1 more line in his notebook. System, not incident. The lights flickered at 9:18, just once, the way buildings remind you they have their own heartbeat. Lynn moved to the district Chromebook cart and initiated a legal export of her own Google Takeout Drive plus Hangouts divided by Chat plus Gmail because custodians cannot preserve what they cannot see. And sometimes the cleanest thing you can do is hand a clean package to the person with the badge tomorrow morning. She named the archive TAKEOUTLINHTRAN 202511013. Zip and watched the progress bar crawl like a cautious animal. In between captures, there were the small human moments that kept a night from turning into only a task. Maya called her grandmother to ask if she could stay. The grandmother said, "Tell that boy I'm proud," loud enough for the room to hear. A freshman brought a stapler as a gift. Mr. Alvarez fixed the squeak in the east door with a shot of oil and a smile that said, "I've been waiting to fix this for years." At 9:51, the last file synced. They wrote a readme, where things came from, how we named them, who saw what when. Miss Ortiz sealed a padded envelope with the USBs, the printed hashes, and a cover letter addressed to Independent Investigator to be named. She put a second set in a fireproof bag with a note to the Office for Civil Rights, and a third set because redundancy is grace in a shoebox that Mr. Alvarez would personally deliver to the pastor's locked office safe before dawn. On the way out, Malik stood in the doorway and listened to the building breathe. He thought of the laughter that had floated through these halls, the whispers that had walked like fog, the string tied in a loop it should never have been tied, the elbow that had learned a bad route years ago. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt ready to sit across from a person with a legal pad and tell the long version without flinching. Ready to look at a board chair and say, without venom, your words traveled. Ready to invite a boy who had elbowed him in the ribs to a table where apology had a shape and a cost and a future. Outside, the parking lot lights buzzed like neon insects. Lynn zipped her bag and grinned without showing teeth. "Evidence beats rumor," she said. Malik nodded. "Tomorrow," he answered, "we see if courage can share a room with accountability." They turned off the last lamp. Miss Ortiz locked the door. Mr. Alvarez checked the handle twice. And the night held its breath for a moment, like a town that knows morning is coming, and this time, it's bringing a clipboard and a choir. Restorative justice and the lines we don't cross. The morning after the library vigil, Malik found a folded agenda on the kitchen table with his father's handwriting along the margin circle. Not hearing. Witnesses, not spectators. Repair, not revenge. And by noon, the multipurpose room at the community center had been rearranged from rows to a circle big enough to hold the people who needed to look one another in the eye. Miss Rivera, the district's restorative practices, lead with a voice like warm water over stone, set ground rules on a poster speak from the I, listen to understand, name the harm, agree to repair, no recording, and then added a line that wasn't standard but needed to be said. This circle is for the children who harmed and the children who were harmed. Adults who enabled, minimized, or profited from the harm will be handled by investigators and, if necessary, the courts. Restoration is not a shortcut around accountability. Chairs creaked, the fluorescent lights clicked awake, and they began where all honest circles begin, with the naming of what was done. Malik spoke first, not because he wanted to, but because the story had begun on his face. He told the diner in the present tense, the locker in the language of a wound, the whistle in the gym that split a breath into a rule, and the loop of string whose meaning he refused to pretend was a mystery. He did not perform pain, he reported facts, and the room learned how facts can be heavy without being loud. Maya 11 last fall in the screenshots held up her wrist and traced where a bruise had bloomed under a varsity elbow. Kevin described the habit of eating quickly so money wouldn't get noticed. Lynn said out loud what the chat threads had revealed, how the joke was always shaped to fit the same kind of kid, how standards was a word that changed color depending on whose skin it touched. When it was his turn, Brett's first sentence curled in on itself like paper near a stove. "It wasn't about race," he said, then swallowed as if the words had teeth. "Miss." Rivera breathed, waited for him into honest, and Brett looked at Malik and flinched as if he'd finally seen his own ring reflected in someone else's cheek. "My dad," he tried, then stopped, then started over. "I used a word I knew was meant to hurt. I hit you because I knew other people would laugh. I thought my name meant there wouldn't be consequences." Beside him, his mother's hands were white at the knuckles, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, where a banner read community in letters that now felt like a dare. Miss Rivera placed the talking piece a smooth riverstone between them. "Name the harm," she said gently but exactly, "and name what repair would look like to the people you harmed." Malik didn't ask for humiliation to answer humiliation. He asked for work that would mean something when the circle ended. That Brett and the boys from Eagle's Nest read and discuss a curriculum on the history that makes loops of string mean what they mean, facilitated by someone who won't let them slide. That they spend Saturdays coaching the middle school rec league where Kevin's little brother plays, learning how to be trusted by children who don't owe them trust. That they fund, from their own allowances and with hours, if not money, a small grant for lockers repaired and cameras installed where accidents happen off-frame. That they stand in the auditorium and say what they did without euphemism or choreography. Brett nodded too fast at first, the way people do when they think agreement is the same as change, and Miss Rivera slowed him down. "This isn't a checkbox," she said. "This is a beginning." Then the line got drawn, steady and bright. "Miss." Rivera turned to the adults, the diner manager who had come because the owner's lawyer told him to, the assistant coach who had perfected the art of looking away, two parents who had spent a week online pretending rumor was reporting, and said, "You are not in this circle for repair, because the harm you did lives in policy and paycheck and public trust. You will meet the investigator, you will meet the code of ethics. If you want to write a letter to the students you misled, you may. If you want to sit in training and learn the words you've been avoiding, you will, but the children will not carry your part of the weight." Ray Kendall bristled, then stared at his hands. The assistant coach opened his mouth and closed it. Somewhere in the building, a basketball thumped, a reminder that the world goes on even when a room decides to become honest. The circle took a break, and when they returned, Miss Rivera brought ritual to paperwork. Each student who had harmed read aloud the clause he was signing. "I committed specific act, which caused harm named by the person harmed. I will complete specific repair by date, and I will report to named adult. If I fail, I will accept specific school consequence, and I will return to this circle to say why." Then she turned to the students who had been harmed and asked them to sign only if the repair matched their need. Some declined a handshake and chose a nod. Some cried. Lynn didn't sign until the words "not about race" had been corrected to "because of race." The tension never left the room. It simply learned how to be useful. On the way out, Mr. Alvarez posted a sign-up sheet for parents and staff. Anti-bias 101, history of symbols, bestander to upstander, and Pastor Elena taped a flyer for a Sunday forum titled "The Loop and the Ladder, Our Town Story." Samuel thanked Miss Rivera with the kind of gratitude that doesn't let a system turn a miracle into a moment, then walked Malik to the car under a sky that had the soft look of evening pretending to be safe. He knew what came after circles like this. The counter-narrative that calls repair weakness, the shadow accounts that call apology a script, the men who test locks after midnight to see if courage forgets to keep the porch light on. Malik tucked the signed agreements into the manila folder between the hashes and the talking points and felt the weight shift from story to structure. "We gave them a way back," he said quietly, "and we kept the door for the adults with the investigator where it belongs." Samuel nodded. "Restoration where possible," he said. "Accountability where necessary." The wind picked up. A siren wailed somewhere on another street. Phones buzzed in pockets around town as a new rumor thread tried to take root. And with the ink still drying on the signatures, the next test gathered itself in the dark, the kind that knocks after bedtime and forces a community to decide whether it will bend or link arms and hold, because that is where we go next. The counter-storm, threats, swatting, and a town that linked arms. The first message that felt different arrived at 9:14 p.m. Not a taunt or a coffin emoji, but a countdown gif over a photo of Malik's porch, the numbers bleeding red as if the sender wanted fear to keep time. 5 minutes later, a second account posted his bus route with a winking face, and by 10, the doorbell camera caught a figure in a hoodie placing something that looked like a package by the mailbox and sprinting away, only for Mr. Alvarez to lean into the frame from the sidewalk and call out, "It's just a shoebox," his flashlight held like a lantern from an older century. And even before Malik could exhale, the blue strobes washed the living room again, sirens, radio crackle, hard knocks that tried to make the family's walls remember other families' walls. This time, the tactic had leveled up. A 911 caller with a voice smoothed by practice claimed a weapon, a fight, a hostage keywords engineered to bypass doubt, and you could feel the algorithm of fear reach for the handle. Samuel did what he had drilled with Malik at the kitchen table. Lights up, foyer camera live on a public safety stream link, hands visible, chain on, calm voice through the gap. He gave the CAD number and last 4 digits of the reported callback, asked the sergeant to read the call narrative, said the sentence that matters most to officers who want to go home. "Everyone here is safe, and we are recording for your safety too." And in the crackle between dispatch and porch, you could hear the shift in the older sergeant's tone from urgent to human. The knock was still hard. The air was still tight. Malik still felt the strange shame of proving you are not what a lie says you are. But the scene de-escalated in real time because 3 things stood between a tactic and a tragedy. A porch light the family refused to turn off, a policy the chief had reluctantly agreed to test callback verification on high-risk anonymous calls when the situation allowed, and a town that had decided it would not let one house stand alone. Before the cruisers rolled, Pastor Elena and 2 ushers stood across the street with hands folded like a prayer that wouldn't get in the way. The veteran who runs the VFW hall parked his pickup at the corner with hazard lights blinking slow like a heartbeat. Lynn's parents and 3 other AAPI families formed a quiet arc on the sidewalk with thermoses of tea, their presence a sentence without words. "We are watching because we have been watched before," and an auntie from church texted the mutual aid thread, "Porch light protocol on. Rotate in 2s. No arguments, only witness." When the officers left, the porch didn't empty. It organized. The Vong Tron Bao Ver Hoc Dung, the school guard circle, took shape in 30 minutes. A Google sheet with shifts and phone trees. A laminated card that explained, in gentler words, the callback policy to any responding officer who hadn't read the memo. A babysitter swap so exhausted parents could sleep, and a quiet promise that someone would be within shouting distance until the investigation had teeth. By morning, the courthouse had a line as if justice were a baker's window, and people had decided to show up early. Samuel filed for an emergency protective order that named the handles and the patterns false report. It targeted harassment because of race, interference with civil rights, and Judge Morales, who has watched this county pretend to be gentler than it is, signed a TRO that did 3 practical things. Barred contact across all channels, including new accounts created to evade, flagged the family's address in dispatch as verified swatting target, require callback and eye contact assessment before entry when safe, and ordered platforms to preserve data for a subpoena that would need hours, not weeks. The DA's office, which had been inching toward the story as if it might bite, took a step they could not unstep. An affidavit for a warrant to unmask 3 accounts, an announcement that false emergency reporting causing emergency response would be charged as a felony, and a pointed line about bias-motivated intimidation. Reporters who had called it drama on Monday used civil rights by Wednesday because a judge's signature changes vocabulary in newsrooms that take their cues from stamps as much as from conscience. The arrest came quietly, the way accountability sometimes does when it has done its homework. A 19-year-old nursing, major dropout with a router, 2 prepaid phones, and a message history that rhymed with the diner, the locker, the gym, and behind him, because harm rarely travels alone, a small lattice of older men in a neighborhood watch group chat that had learned how to launder grievance as concern, one of them a cousin of the booster treasurer who had been so busy telling everyone to keep it civil that he had not noticed his own hands were full of gasoline. The police chief, looking 10 years more tired than last month, stood at a podium and said the thing chiefs sometimes forget how to say: "We will not be used as a weapon against a family seeking redress. We have updated our verification policy accordingly." He took questions and did not flinch when Pastor Elena asked for numbers. That night, the story's center of gravity moved. A local anchor, usually careful to keep her voice neutral enough to please the ad buyers, introduced a segment called The Long Version, and they ran it. Not the clipped diner video, but the full audio. Not the rumor about a record, but the district's own discipline data, disaggregated by race. Not a faceless student matter, but Dolores on camera, hands shaking as she said, "I was told not to get involved with those kids," and then looked into the lens like it might be a confessional. Coach Palmer stood in the shadow behind the bleachers and said, without looking at the camera, "I saw things and called them rough play because it was easier. I'm sorry." On the same broadcast, viewers watched Brett face pale, jaw clenched, not perform contrition but read the words he had agreed to read in circle. "I hit Malik and used a slur because I thought my name meant rules were options. I am repairing by." And for once the comments did not feed on the boy's shame. They asked where to donate for the locker camera fund Lynn had posted at lunch. The backlash didn't stop. The shadow pages kept hissing. A second swatting attempt pinged off the new protocol with a dead click like a bad key in a good lock. But the narrative no longer curled at the edges. The VFW put folding chairs on Malik's block on Friday night and called it a porch-in. Neighbors told their own long versions into a mic that wasn't connected to the internet, just to each other. The PTA, which had spent 2 years discussing bake sale themes, voted to fund anti-bias training before brownies. And a pro bono civil rights firm out of the city filed a letter of interest to monitor the district's reforms, which meant the next meeting wouldn't be the last one with a stenographer. By Sunday, even the quiet houses knew the next right question wasn't, "Whose side are you on?" but, "What standard are we willing to say out loud?" The judge's TRO had a review date. The DA's charges had elements that needed proving. The independent investigator had a box of USBs labeled in a teenager's hand, and the board had a draft consent decree waiting for red lines. Malik slept through his porch shift for the first time in days. Samuel watched the safety stream for an hour anyway, then turned it off. Not because the world had become safer, but because the town had become louder in the right places. And on Monday morning, when the superintendent's calendar showed a closed-door session labeled Reform Draft, the hallway outside filled with students who had learned how to stand without shouting and adults who had learned how to stand without hiding. And that is the hallway we walk toward next, where promises become policies, and policies get signatures that outlive a headline. Monday did not arrive with trumpets. It arrived with binders. The superintendent's conference room smelled like dry erase and new paper, and the long table carried stacks. That meant this wasn't a gesture, it was a contract. On the wall, a screen showed 4 words in plain font that felt braver than banners. Binding Reform Agreement. Miss. Calder cleared her throat. Principal Keating uncapped a pen twice. District Council Ballard looked like a person who had slept with statutes under her pillow. And an independent monitor, the kind who measures progress with clipboards instead of compliments, sat at the corner, ready to count. Samuel and Malik took seats along the side with Lynn, Miss Ortiz, and Mr. Alvarez, because the long version belongs in the room when the short version gets signed. The agreement was not a speech. It was a spine. It named what the district would do and when. By 30 days, publish a student bill of rights on every classroom wall, language kids can actually read, stating that racial slurs and symbols are major incidents with mandatory responses. By 45 days, retrain the SRO unit under a new policy that bans anonymous tip searches unless corroborated by articulated, written criteria. By 60 days, install cameras at the blind corners identified by students and staff, with privacy safeguards reviewed by the monitor. By each quarter, release public dashboards that disaggregate discipline and SRO contacts by race, disability, and grade, so numbers can't hide behind averages. Effective immediately, launch an anonymous reporting channel hosted by a third party outside the chain that failed, with protection against retaliation printed on the portal's first page. And this was misplaced. Rivera's fingerprint embed restorative circles as a first response to student-on-student harm, with guardrails so adults who enabled harm meet investigators, not forgiveness. It also made promises with teeth. If deadlines slipped, the monitor could escalate to the state. If dashboards lied, the consent decree extended. If retaliation appeared, funding would meet conditions it had never met before. The board voted. The ayes were not polite, they were relieved. Hargrove resigned by email at 10:37 a.m. The district reassigned Denton pending retraining and community review. Coach Palmer requested to remain but accepted a remedial plan that looked like a syllabus in humility. At 11:04, the superintendent signed, and in that small scratch of pen on paper, you could hear a building exhale. The covenant reached beyond walls. A new fund, Document to Protect, opened at the Community Foundation by lunchtime, seeded with transparent donations from businesses that had decided community had to mean policy, not platitudes. The first microgrants went to locker repairs, student-led evidence kits for kids who needed them, and translation services so parents could read what their children had been breathing. Lynn posted the locker camera fundraiser. The total cleared in an hour. Dolores took a day off from the diner and came to the signing in her cardigan. By week's end, she would have a new job title, Shift Lead. Training Liaison and Ray Kendall would have a termination letter that spelled out more than one reason, each sentence ending with a period and a lesson. In the auditorium that afternoon, Malik stood on a stage that had seen pep rallies and musicals and, until lately, silence. He did not make a victory speech. He read passages from the new Student Bill of Rights like they were a poem the town hadn't heard yet, and when he got to the line about "every report will be answered with action," he paused and let the words land where whispers used to breed. Then he stepped aside so other voices could speak. Kevin described the first morning he ate slowly without fear. Maya lifted her sleeve and showed skin without a bruise. A freshman from the soccer team said he had deleted Eagle's Nest and joined the tutoring club because he wanted to be tired for better reasons. Brett took the mic for exactly as long as the agreement required, looked at the middle schoolers in the front row, and said the sentence he had learned to say without theater: "I hurt people because I thought my name changed the rules. I am changing the rules I listen to." There was no applause line written for him, but the room did something more useful. It did not look away. The independent monitor set office hours in the library where Miss Ortiz now kept a locked cabinet labeled "Records Community Copies." Mr. Alvarez installed a plaque in the east hallway that had squeaked for years. The oil stain was still fresh when kids walked by and smiled at a door that finally closed softly. Pastor Elena's Sunday Forum drew more people than the Fall Festival. On the flyer, the loop had been turned into a ladder, the rungs labeled Educate, Report, Repair, Reform, and the metaphor felt earned. News crews kept asking for a headline. The town kept offering a checklist. Protective order extended. Swatter arraigned. Neighborhood watch. Chat disbanded by court order with mandated training for its members. The PTA voted their budget into anti-bias workshops before bake sales. The district's PR account changed its tone from internal matter to public milestones, and a page on the website began to fill with dates kept and numbers checked. It wasn't perfect. It was measurable. On a gray morning that would have been forgettable in any other year, Malik stood at a podium in the gym for an assembly called simply, "What We've Changed." He wore his favorite hoodie, not a robe. He spoke the line he had tested in the quiet between sirens and signatures. "We don't need anyone to be afraid of us. We need a system that is ashamed enough to change and proud enough to keep changing." He motioned to the bulletin board where the first quarterly dashboard was pinned next to the choir schedule. He thanked the people who watched the porches and the ones who watched the data. He thanked the librarian who opened a door after hours and the custodian who heard a building breathe. He thanked the boys who chose to repair and the adults who chose to resign. When he finished, he didn't hold the applause. He pointed to a table where clipboards waited, sign-ups for student data reviewers, hall monitors who are listeners, and a youth council to meet the monitor monthly. Kids lined up not because goodness had become trendy, but because standards had become public. That night, the house was finally quiet in an ordinary way, the clink of a spoon, the soft laugh of a boy who could taste his dinner before thinking about cameras. Samuel slid the manila folder back onto a shelf labeled long version and wrote a new label under it, next quarter. Malik set his phone face down for the first time in weeks, looked at the porch light through the window, and let himself believe that light could mean welcome instead of watch. Outside, the block was just a block again, no arc of sentinels, no hazard lights, just neighbors who waved because waving was enough. And while somewhere a rumor surely tried to rehearse, the town had chosen a different habit, to write down what it would do, and then do it where everyone could see. Here's where we leave Malik for now. Not as a headline, not as a victim who overcame, but as a kid who learned to name harm, gather proof, and ask his town to grow a spine. The diner is just a diner again, the hallway is still a hallway, and the porch light finally means welcome more than watch. Nothing magical happened. Paper did. People did. A promise moved from a microphone into policy, from policy into practice, and from practice into habits you can measure. Samuel slid the manila folder labeled long version onto a shelf and wrote a new label beneath it. Next quarter, because justice isn't a moment, it's a maintenance plan. Lynn's locker camera fund turned into a line item on the school budget. Miss Ortiz kept a cabinet of community copies that anyone could check out when memory tried to blur the edges. Mr. Alvarez listened to the building breathe and smiled when the east door closed softly for the first time in years. Brett showed up on Saturdays to coach kids who didn't owe him trust and earned a little anyway. The Student Bill of Rights hung in every classroom at eye level, not thumbtacked high like a decoration. The consent decree ticked dates like a metronome that refused to speed up or slow down for politics. Did the comments stop? No. Did the shadows quit? Not really. But they started to learn a new truth. Rumor drowns faster in places that keep receipts. And a boy who once had to lower his voice to survive now speaks just loud enough to be heard and then points to the dashboard on the wall that says whether adults kept their word. If you were waiting for a dramatic last scene, this is it. A community choosing standards over sides. A father teaching that dignity is a decision, not a permission slip. A school discovering that the opposite of making a scene is not silence, it's structure. And a 13-year-old is writing the long version so the next kid doesn't have to. As you close this story, take one question with you. In your diner, in your hallway, on your block, what standard are you willing to say out loud and keep? If this episode moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear the long version. Tell us in the comments where you've seen quiet courage turn into lasting change. And if you're walking through a season where the world is loud and unfair, remember Malik's rule when the room tries to swallow you. Lower your voice, take notes, and find the people who will keep the light on while you turn a moment into a record. We'll be back with another long version, different names, same promise. Until then, keep your porch lights honest and your paper organized. Justice, like any good habit, grows with use.